He grabbed every single thing he owned, threw it into a beat-up van at 4 in the morning, and drove away from the life that was slowly killing him. No note. No goodbye. Just gone. But the moment he pulled out of that driveway, a woman in a wheelchair was blocking the road. And when he said, half joking, half desperate, "You want to come?" she looked straight at him and said, "Yes." That one word destroyed every plan he had left. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it hits you, subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. The alarm went off at 4:47 a.m. Joel Mercer didn't move. He lay flat on his back, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom he'd been sleeping in for 6 years, and for the first time in all those years, he didn't reach over to shut it off. He just let it scream, let it fill the whole room, let it bounce off the walls until it felt like the sound was inside his chest. Then he reached over and smashed it so hard the plastic cracked down the middle. He sat up slowly, rubbed his face with both hands, pressed his palms so hard into his eye sockets that he saw stars. Get up. Make breakfast. Pack the lunch. Wake the kid. Drive to school. Drive to the site. Come home. Cook dinner. Do the homework. Put him to bed. Lie here. Repeat. That was his life. 6 years of it. And not once, not one single morning had he let himself ask the question that was sitting in his chest right now like a stone. What if I just didn't? He stood up, walked to the kitchen, made coffee, stared out the window at the driveway where the old van sat under a broken streetlight. He'd rebuilt that van himself. 3 years ago, when his hands needed something to do at night after his son Ryan fell asleep. He'd torn it apart and put it back together in the dark piece by piece like he was trying to rebuild something else entirely, and the engine just happened to be there. He drank his coffee. He looked at the van. He looked back at the hallway that led to Ryan's room. And then, for reasons he would later be unable to fully explain, Joel Mercer walked to his bedroom, pulled a bag out from under the bed and started packing. Not a lot. A few shirts. A jacket. His tools because his hands didn't know how to exist without something to fix. His wallet. A road atlas he'd had since college that was held together with a rubber band. He wrote a note for Ryan's school bag, called his neighbor Mrs. Patterson, a 68-year-old woman who had watched Ryan before when jobs ran long, and left a voicemail at 5 a.m. that said, "Pam, it's Joel. I know this is insane. I need a few days. I'll explain everything when I'm back. Ryan knows where the cereal is. I'm sorry. Thank you." Then he stood in Ryan's doorway. His son was 7 years old, sleeping with his mouth open, one arm hanging off the mattress, his sneakers still on, because he'd fallen asleep before Joel could get to bedtime properly. Joel walked over, untied the sneakers, pulled them off without waking him, covered him with the blanket that had slipped to the floor. He stood there for a long moment watching his son breathe. "I'll be back," he thought. "I just need 3 days. I just need to remember I'm still a person." He kissed Ryan on the forehead so gently it didn't even disturb the air. Then he walked out to the driveway, threw his bag in the back of the van, and started the engine. It turned over rough and then smoothed out. Always did that. That was just its personality now. He'd learned to trust it. He'd fixed everything in that engine with his own hands, so he knew exactly what it could take. He pulled out of the driveway at 5:12 in the morning. He had no destination. He had a half tank of gas and $43 in his wallet, and maybe enough in his checking account to cover a cheap motel for 2 nights if he didn't eat too much. He had a road atlas that was 12 years old and probably wrong about half the highway exits. He didn't care. For the first time in 6 years, he was moving not towards something, not for someone, just moving, and that alone felt like breathing for the first time after being underwater. Joel. High made it 2 blocks. The old neighborhood was quiet at that hour. Garbage cans on the curb. Porch lights still on. One dog barking somewhere behind a fence. He turned the corner onto Aldine Street and immediately hit the brakes. There was a woman in the middle of the road. Not standing, sitting. In a wheelchair right there in the center lane beneath the one working streetlight on the block, with a phone pressed to her ear, and an expression on her face that could have cut glass. For a second, he thought she was hurt. He killed the engine, jumped out. Hey, you okay?" She looked up at him with dark eyes that had absolutely zero distress in them. Sharp, steady eyes. The kind that evaluated a situation and found it lacking in about 3 seconds. "I'm fine," she said into the phone to whoever was on the other end, not to him. "I said I'm fine, Kevin. Tell the driver not to bother. I'll figure it out." She hung up, looked at him. "My car service canceled," she said flatly. "Apparently at 5 a.m. I don't have a lot of options." Joel looked at her, then at his van idling behind him, then back at her. She was somewhere in her mid-30s, he guessed, professionally dressed even at this hour like she'd been awake for hours already or had never gone to sleep. There was something about the way she held herself in that chair, perfectly straight, completely controlled, that made her look like she was sitting at the head of a conference table rather than in the middle of a residential street in the dark. "Where do you need to go?" he asked. She looked at the van. The way she looked at it was not kind. "I need to get to my office on Montgomery," she said. "It's about 12 miles. "Yeah, I know where that is." "Your vehicle," she said carefully, "appears to be from approximately 1987. "92, he said. "But she runs clean." She studied him for one more second. "You have somewhere to be at 5 a.m. And this is where something happened in Joel Mercer that he would think about later in a motel room 3 states away and still not be able to explain. Instead of saying, "Yes, I'll drop you off on my way," he looked at the van, then at her, and something about the absurdity of the whole morning, the cracked alarm clock, the packed bag, the $43, the fact that he had left without knowing where he was going, all of it rose up in his chest at once. He almost laughed. "No," he said. "Not really." She raised an eyebrow. "I was just going," he said, and the honesty of it surprised even him. "Going where?" "Anywhere." A pause. Something moved across her face. Not sympathy, something more complicated. Like she recognized a word in a language she'd almost forgotten. "Anywhere," she repeated quietly. "Yeah." She looked down the empty street, then at the van, then at him, and then Joel Mercer said something he still cannot fully account for. Said it like it came up from somewhere below. Thought below planning from some part of him that was done being reasonable. "You want to come?" He said it half like a joke, half not. She looked at him. There was a very long pause. "Yes," she said. He almost said what? "I'm sorry." "Yes," she repeated with the same flat certainty she'd used to tell her driver not to come back. "I'll come." I wasn't really." "You asked," she said. "I'm answering." Joel stood on Aldine Street at 5:14 in the morning, staring at a woman he had never seen before in his life, who was looking back at him like this was a business decision she had already run the numbers on and was prepared to execute. "I don't know where I'm going," he said. "I know. I've got $43. I have a card. The van doesn't have AC." She looked at the van with the expression of a woman who had faced worse. "I noticed," she said. He stared at her. "You don't know me," he said. "You don't know me either," she said. "That's not—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "Ma'am, I can't just—" "My name isn't ma'am," she said. "It's Claire. Claire Sutton. And you are Joel." "Joel." She said it like she was confirming a reservation. "Joel, I have a board meeting in 4 hours that I have been dreading for 11 weeks. I have not slept more than 4 hours in 3 days, and you just pulled up in front of me going nowhere at 5 in the morning." She paused. "I've made riskier decisions than this with worse information." He looked at her for a long moment. She looked back. Neither of them moved. Then he walked around to the passenger side, opened the door, and without a word, because he was starting to understand this woman did not require assistance to be offered, only to be not gotten in the way of, he stood aside. She maneuvered herself with efficiency and zero fanfare. There was a small ramp mechanism on her chair that he didn't know how to ask about, so he didn't. He figured out the fold quickly enough. He loaded the chair into the back without breaking it or acting strange about it, which he suspected mattered more than he knew. He got in the driver's side. The engine turned over rough, then smoothed out. He pulled away from the curb. Neither of them spoke for a full minute. "You really have no destination," she said, not a question. "I was thinking south," he said. "Maybe the coast." "Which coast?" "Whichever one I hit first." She was quiet. "And you do this often?" she said. "Just drive?" "No," he said. "First time." "What changed?" He thought about Ryan sleeping with his shoes on, about the alarm he'd smashed, about the ceiling he'd stared at in the dark. "I woke up this morning," he said, "and I couldn't remember who I was before I was trying to survive." Silence. The road opened up ahead of them, the city thinning out, the sky starting to go from black to dark blue. "Yeah," Claire said quietly. Very quietly. Like she wasn't sure she meant to say it out loud. Just that one word. Yeah. But the way she said it told him everything. She wasn't just agreeing with him. She was talking about herself. He found that out later by degrees, the way you find things out about a person when you're trapped in a small vehicle with them, with nowhere to be. Claire Sutton was, as it turned out, the CEO of Sutton Capital Group, which he'd never heard of, but which she said without ego, had about $3 billion in assets under management. She'd been running it since she was 31, when her father had stepped back due to health issues, and she'd stepped in because no one else was going to. She had been using a wheelchair since 24, a spinal condition that had progressed over 2 years before leveling off. She told him this in a tone that was completely neutral, the way you state a fact about the weather, and he received it the same way, which he understood later had surprised her. She had not taken a day off in over 2 years. Her phone, which she turned face down on her knee about 20 minutes into the drive, had already buzzed 46 times. He found that out because at some point in the first hour she told it. "Kevin again?" he asked. "Kevin Dana, the London office, my assistant, and I believe at least 2 members of the board who have apparently noticed I'm not in the building yet." "What did you tell them?" She was quiet for a moment. "Nothing yet," she said. He glanced over. "You haven't told them anything?" "I turned it face down," she said. He almost laughed again. Claire Sutton, CEO of $3 billion, is currently ghosting her entire company from a 1992 van. She looked straight ahead. "Don't make it weird," she said. And he laughed. Actually laughed out loud, the first real laugh in so long he wasn't sure the sound was right. And after a moment, something happened in Claire Sutton's expression that she seemed to not entirely intend. The corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly. But it moved. By the time the sun fully came up, they were 40 miles outside of the city. Joel had the window down. The wind was warm, and the road was mostly empty. The van hummed at 62 miles an hour, the way it always did, solid steady, a little loud. He'd stopped at a gas station and come back with 2 bad coffees and a pack of peanut butter crackers, which he'd offered her with no ceremony. She'd taken them without ceremony. They'd eaten in silence, watching the sunrise happen over a flat stretch of highway. He'd thought about Ryan. About Mrs. Patterson, who would find the voicemail and shake her head, and then go next door anyway, because that was who she was. He'd thought about the note. He hadn't left the one he should have written, but hadn't been able to find the words for. "I'm sorry. I'll be back. I just needed to go be a person for a minute." "You have kids?" Claire asked. He looked over. "A son," he said. "Ryan, he's 7. "Where is he?" "Home," he said. "With a neighbor I trust." She nodded slowly. Processed that. "His mother," she said, and it was careful, not prying, just honest. "Not in the picture," he said. "Hasn't been for 4 years." Another nod. She didn't push. He appreciated that. "Do you have kids?" he asked. She looked out at the road. "No," she said. "I have a company." The way she said it, not bitter, not proud. Just accurate. Just true. Like she was reading a line from a document she'd read so many times she'd stopped hearing it. He watched her for a second. "Is that enough?" he asked. She didn't answer for a long time. The road stretched out. The van hummed. "I used to think the question didn't apply to me," she said finally. "I thought the work was enough, the results, the building something." She paused. I haven't thought about whether it's enough in a long time. I've just been doing it. Why'd you stop thinking about it? She looked over at him. For just a moment, there was something in her face that was younger than everything else about her. Something that looked like it had been waiting behind the pressed jacket and the flat certainty for a very long time. Because the answer scared me, she said. And then she looked back at the road. And Joel Mercer kept driving. Not saying anything. Because some things don't need a response. Sometimes you just keep moving and let a person breathe. The van hummed on. The sun climbed higher. Neither of them reached for the radio. And somewhere between the city they'd left behind and wherever they were going, two people who had each been holding too much for too long sat next to each other in a beat-up van with the windows down, and for the first time in a very long time, neither of them was pretending everything was fine. They stopped for gas somewhere past the county line at one of those stations that still had a hand-painted sign and a single pump that took forever to click over. Joel got out, stretched his back against the side of the van, and stared at the numbers rolling up on the pump, like he was watching his last reserves drain away, which financially speaking he was. Claire had her phone out again. He could see her through the windshield, not talking, just reading. Her face gave away nothing. It never did. But the way her jaw was set tight, controlled, told him whatever she was reading wasn't good. He finished pumping, came back, got in. "How bad is it?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Define bad." "Your company on fire." "Not yet." She put the phone face down again. "Kevin told the board I have a family emergency." Joel looked at her. "You don't have family." "I know that," she said. "Kevin doesn't know what else to say. He's 26 and terrified of me." "Smart kid." She almost smiled. Almost. "He'll manage for today. Maybe tomorrow if I respond to a few things tonight." "And after that?" She looked out the windshield. "After that, I'll have to go back." He pulled out of the station and back onto the highway. The road ahead was long and flat and wide open. The kind of road that made it easy to believe nothing existed on either side of it. No obligations, no voicemails, no alarm clocks that you had to smash just to feel something. "So we've got today," he said. "Today," she agreed. He nodded. "All right," he said. "Then let's not waste it." She looked at him sideways. "That sounds like the beginning of a very poor decision. Most of my good stories started that way." She was quiet for a moment. "Tell me one," she said. He glanced over. She was looking at the road, not at him, but the question was real. He could hear it, the genuine kind of curiosity that people don't bother with when they're just being polite. So he told her about the time he'd driven 6 hours through a snowstorm with a 2-year-old Ryan in the back seat to make it to his own sister's wedding in Ohio, only to arrive and discover the wedding had been postponed by a week, and nobody had reached him because his phone had died somewhere in Indiana, and he hadn't thought to stop and call. "What did you do?" Claire asked. "Checked into the cheapest motel I could find. Ordered pizza." Ryan had never had pizza before he was 2. We'd been doing all the right things, pureed vegetables and all that. But I was exhausted and done, and I just needed something easy. He paused. He ate 4 slices, fell asleep face down on the bed with cheese on his forehead, and I sat on the floor next to the bed and laughed until I cried. She was quiet. "Not sad crying," he said. "Just release. Like something had been compressed in me for so long that the pizza just broke it loose." "I know that kind," she said softly. "Yeah. The kind that doesn't have a specific reason," she said. "It's just everything at once, and your body decides it's done pretending." He looked at her briefly. "When did you last have one of those?" She thought about it. Really thought he could see her actually searching back through time looking for it. 3 years ago, she said. "My office. After we closed a deal that took 18 months to negotiate. Everyone left. I locked the door." She stopped. And I sat on the floor," she said, "which is for the record not particularly easy for me to do. And I cried for about 8 minutes. Then I got up, washed my face, and had a call with Tokyo." Joel was quiet for a moment. 8 minutes, he said. "That's what I allowed myself." "You timed it." I didn't need to, I knew. He shook his head slowly, not in judgment, in something closer to recognition. I do the same thing, he said. Not with crying, but with stopping. I give myself until the end of the block to feel whatever it is. Then I have to be Dad again. She turned to look at him. And does it work? No, he said. It just delays it. Yes, she said quietly. That's exactly what it does. The van hummed. The road opened up into a long, slow curve that bent toward the south, and Joel followed it without thinking. The wheel easy in his hands, the kind of driving that's more muscle memory than decision. My father used to say, Claire began, then stopped. What? He used to say that strength isn't what you feel. It's what you do while you're feeling everything else. She paused. I've lived by that my entire adult life. Sounds like a good man. How was? She said. He was also in the hospital for 2 weeks last spring and called me every day to make sure I wasn't checking on him too often. Joel laughed. He sounds stubborn. Enormously, she said, and the warmth in her voice when she said it was the first completely unguarded thing he'd heard from her. He built that company from $40,000 and sheer refusal to be told no, and when his health went, he handed it to me without making me feel like I was receiving something fragile. She paused. Like he knew I could hold it. Could you? She looked at him steadily. I have been. That's not the same thing. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that happens when something true gets said and both people need a moment to let it settle. He turned onto a state road that ran alongside a river he didn't know which one didn't check the atlas, and the water moved slow and silver to their right. Can I ask you something? He said. You've been asking me things since we left the city, she said. That's not going to stop you. Fair. He adjusted his grip on the wheel. The wheelchair. Do you ever do people make it weird, in ways you can't call out without it becoming a bigger thing? She looked at him. Every day, she said. Like what? Like, she said, and he could hear her deciding how honest to be making the calculation, then deciding to just go, like the way people talk to me, slightly louder than necessary, as if my legs being compromised somehow affects my hearing. Or the way men in meetings will direct their responses to whoever is standing next to me, instead of to me, then look surprised when I'm the one who corrects them. Or my personal favorite, the ones who tell me I'm an inspiration. She said the last word with a precision that made it sound like a different kind of insult altogether. Because you're doing normal things, he said. Because I'm doing normal things, she confirmed. Running a company, being in a room, existing. She shook her head. The inspiration narrative is the most exhausting because you can't argue with it. They mean well, so you smile. And then you go home, and you're so tired of performing competence on top of competence on top of... She stopped herself. On top of just being a person, he finished. She looked at him. Something shifted. Yes, she said. Exactly that. He nodded, kept driving. I don't think you need to explain it to me, he said. Not to prove it. You can just say it and I'll believe you. She was very still for a moment. That is, she said carefully, a surprisingly rare thing to hear. Shouldn't be. No, she said. It shouldn't. They drove in quiet for a while after that. Not the early silence of two strangers sizing each other up. Something different, more settled. The kind of quiet that builds between people who've started to actually see each other. Around mid-morning, they found a roadside diner, the kind with a screen door and a handwritten menu, and a waitress who called everyone honey without irony. Joel pulled into the gravel lot and cut the engine and just sat there for a second. This okay? He asked. She was already looking at the door, calculating the entry step or no step width of the entrance. 1 step, she said. That's manageable. He didn't offer to help. He'd figured that out already. He got out, went around, got her chair from the back, set it up without fumbling because he'd paid attention the first time. She got herself out and down with the same efficiency, no performance, no waiting for commentary. They went in. The waitress, her name tag said. Deb didn't blink. She handed them menus and brought coffee without being asked. Where y'all headed? Deb asked. Joel and Claire looked at each other at the same time. South, Joel said. Visiting family. No, Claire said. Deb smiled like this was a completely normal answer. Best kind of trip, she said, and went to check on someone else. Claire looked at her menu. Joel looked at his. The diner was half full. Farmers, a couple of truck drivers, a young family with a toddler who was systematically removing all the sugar packets from the table holder and stacking them on the floor. Can I ask you something now? Claire said, not looking up from the menu. Sure. Ryan's mother. She said it carefully. You said not in the picture for 4 years. That means he was 3. Yeah. What happened? He put down the menu. She left. That's the short version. She looked up. And the long one. He took a breath. This was the kind of thing he didn't talk about, not because it was too painful anymore, but because Ryan was 7 now, and what was the point of excavating it? But something about being 40 miles from anywhere in a diner with a woman who had just told him the truth about her life made the excavation feel less like damage and more like honesty. She wasn't ready, he said. That's the most true version I've got. She was 26 when Ryan was born. I was 29. We were together. We'd planned it, but the reality of it, the weight of it, hit her in a way she didn't anticipate. He paused. She stayed for 3 years. She tried. I believe that. But one morning she told me she felt like she was disappearing inside the life we'd built, and she needed to go find out if she still existed. Claire was very still. What did you say? She asked. I said, I understand, but he needs his mother. And she said, I know, I'm sorry. He looked down at the table. And then she left. Called a few times that first year. Then less. Then not at all. Ryan stopped asking about her around age 5. Claire said nothing. I don't hate her, Joel said. I used to. But I got to a point where I understood that some people aren't built for the weight of it. Doesn't make her evil. Just means Ryan and I had to figure out how to be enough for each other. And are you? Claire asked. Enough for each other. He thought about it. Most days, he said. Then there's a morning like today, where I wake up at 5 a.m., and I can't remember who I am outside of making sure he's okay. She nodded slowly. Deb came back. Joel ordered eggs and toast. Claire ordered oatmeal and fruit. Deb refilled the coffee and left. Do you miss her? Claire asked. Ryan's mother. No, yourself. The version of you before survival was the whole job. He looked at her. Nobody had ever asked him that before. Not once in 6 years. Not his sister, not his neighbor Pam, not the handful of people at work who knew his situation and were kind about it. No one had put it in those words. The version of you before survival was the whole job. Something tightened in his throat. Yeah, he said. I do. She held his gaze. What was he like? He almost deflected. Old habit. Then he didn't. Louder, he said. I used to take up more space, laughed faster. I wanted to build things, not just fix things. There's a difference. Fixing is reactive. Building it's a choice. It's forward. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. Somewhere around year 2 of doing everything alone, I switched from building to maintaining, and I didn't even notice when it happened. Claire was quiet for a moment. I did the same thing, she said, and her voice was lower now. I used to want to change things. Not just grow the company, change how the whole sector operated. I had all these ideas about what ethical investment could look like if you actually committed to it structurally. She paused. Somewhere in the last 5 years, I started just protecting what we already had. Keeping the machine running. Maintaining, he said. Yes. She looked at him. Maintaining. The food came. They ate. The toddler at the other table had successfully emptied the entire sugar packet holder and was now looking at the pile with tremendous satisfaction. His parents were too tired to do anything but let him have it. Joel watched them and felt something familiar, that specific exhaustion, the kind that lives in the shoulders, the kind you don't even try to name anymore. Does it get easier? Claire asked, following his gaze. With the kid. With all of it. I thought about it honestly. It gets different. Ryan's easier than he was at 3. but I'm also more tired than I was at 3. So it sort of evens out. She laughed. A real one, short, surprised, unpolished. The kind that happens before you can decide whether it's appropriate. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You have a good laugh," he said. She stopped immediately. Recomposed. "Don't," she said, but it wasn't cold. It was self-conscious. Something younger again. Something that had learned to put a wall up around anything that might be taken as softness. "I mean it as a fact, not a compliment," he said. "Like how I'd tell you your coffee is hot." She studied him. "That," she said, "is the strangest way anyone has ever said that to me." "Did it work?" A pause. "Marginally," she said. He smiled, went back to his eggs. Outside, the river was still moving past. The diner hummed with quiet conversation, the smell of coffee and griddle grease, the sound of Deb's sneakers on linoleum. Joel paid the check before Claire could. She looked at him like she was going to argue. "It's $16, he said. "Don't make it a thing." She didn't make it a thing. They went back to the van. The sun was higher now, the day warming up, and the route ahead still had no plan to it, except the general idea of south and the road that would take them there. He started the engine, let it smooth out. "Joel," she said. "Yeah." She was looking straight ahead, the same way she'd said "yeah" that first morning, quietly, almost to herself. "Thank you," she said, "for not making me explain myself." He put the van in gear. "You don't have to explain yourself to me, Claire," he said. "You just have to sit here." She didn't answer. But when he pulled out of the gravel lot and back onto the road, she reached over and turned the radio on. For the first time, I found something low and acoustic and let it fill the space between them. And she didn't turn it off. The van died at 2:47 in the afternoon. No dramatic warning. No grinding or shuddering or smell of something burning. It just stopped, like it had made a quiet decision. One moment they were moving at 60 miles an hour down a 2-lane state road with nothing but flat land and telephone poles on either side. And the next, the engine cut out. The power steering went heavy in Joel's hands, and he guided the whole thing to the gravel shoulder on pure muscle memory, while Claire braced one hand flat against the dashboard without making a sound. He got it stopped, sat there for a second. "Well?" he said. "Yes," she said. He got out. The hood release was stubborn the way it always was. You had to press the latch and lift simultaneously, a trick only he knew. He got it up, propped it open, and stood there looking at the engine, the way you look at something you built yourself and trusted and are now slightly betrayed by. The heat came up off the asphalt in waves. No shade, no buildings. One truck blew past so fast the van rocked in the wake of it, and Joel had to catch the hood with his palm. Claire had her window down. "What is it? Give me a minute." He checked the obvious things first. Coolant fine. Oil fine. Battery connections fine. He worked his way deeper, pressing and pulling, feeling for what was wrong, the way a doctor uses his hands when the imaging isn't available. Then he found it. A fuel line, a connection he'd replaced 18 months ago with a part that had been almost right, but not quite, and almost right had finally finished being enough. He stood up, wiped his hands on his jeans, came around to her window. "Fuel line fitting," he said. "I've got the tools. I don't have the part." She looked at him steadily. "How bad?" "I can get it running well enough to move," he said. "Probably. But I need something to seal it temporarily until I can get to a parts store." "Where's the nearest parts store?" He looked down the road in both directions. "No idea." She already had her phone out. He watched her pull up Maps, search, zoom. "There's an auto parts store 14 miles north," she said. "Town called Riley." 14 miles back the way we came." "Yes." He looked at the engine, back at her. "I can try to flag someone down, get a ride." "Or," she said, "I can call a car service, they can take you there and back, and we don't have to rely on the goodwill of passing strangers." "The goodwill of passing strangers got you in this van this morning," he said. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second. "That's fair," she said. "But I'm still calling the car." She made the call. The car would be 40 minutes. Joel went back to the engine. He did what he could with what he had wrapped the connection tight with electrical tape from his toolbox, which would hold pressure maybe 30% better and maybe not at all. It was a measure, not a solution. He came back and leaned against the van on the passenger side facing the road, because the sun was directly overhead and the hood provided the only narrow strip of shade available. Claire had her window down and her arm resting on the door phone, face up on her knee, now reading something. He noticed she'd stopped trying to hide that she was working. He didn't say anything about it. "How often does the van break down?" she asked without looking up. "First time in 8 months." "That's more reassuring than I expected." "She's not a bad machine," he said. "She just needs maintenance I don't always have time for." Claire looked up from the phone. "That's the second time you've said that, about not having time. It comes up. When do you have time, Joel? What does your week actually look like?" He almost deflected again. Then he didn't. "I'm on site by 6:30, he said. "Construction management. I oversee 3 crews. I'm usually back by 5:30 if nothing goes wrong, which means by 6 because something always goes wrong. I pick Ryan up from after school at 6. We get home. I cook something, or we do takeout twice a week when I'm too fried to cook. Homework, bath, story, bed. He's down by 8:39 if he fights it. Then I have about 2 hours to do anything else that needs doing. Laundry bills, repairs. The 43 things on the list I keep moving to the next day. I'm asleep by 11. I do it again." She was quiet. "Every day," she said. "Monday through Friday. Weekends I have him full-time, so it's different. It's better, actually. We do things. We go to the park. We build stuff in the garage. Last month we built a birdhouse out of scrap wood, and it's genuinely terrible. It looks like it was designed by someone who has never seen a bird, but he painted it, and we put it in the yard, and a sparrow moved in, so I guess we got something right." She was watching him. He could feel it without looking. "You love him enormously," she said. "Yeah," he said simply. "He's the best thing I've ever done. And the hardest. Same thing most of the time." She looked back at the road. A car went past, slowed, and kept going. Someone checking if they needed help, deciding they didn't look desperate enough to stop. "Do you have anyone?" she asked. "Not for Ryan, for you." He thought about it honestly. "My sister calls once a week. My neighbor Pam is good people. The guys on my crew, we get a beer sometimes on Fridays." He paused. "But nobody who know. Not like that. Not someone who's just for me." "Because there's no room," she said. "Because I forgot to leave room," he said. "There's a difference." She considered that. "Is there?" He looked at her. "You think I don't have room because my life is full. I think I don't have room because at some point I decided not having room was just the shape of things and stopped looking." She didn't answer right away. She looked back at the phone in her lap, then set it down. "I made the same decision," she said quietly. "I framed it as choosing my work, as preferring autonomy, not needing the complication." She paused. "That's what I told myself." But I think what actually happened," she said, and she said it like she was pulling something out from somewhere she'd sealed shut, "is that I couldn't figure out how to be both things. The person who runs the room who has to, because if I walk into a space and show uncertainty, someone will use it, and also the person who comes home and needs something. I couldn't hold both of those at once, so I got rid of the second one." He looked at her for a long moment. "The person who needs something," he said. "That's not a weakness." "I know that," she said. "Intellectually, I know that. But..." She was quiet. The wind moved across the open land on both sides of the road. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk was working a thermal, riding it in slow circles without moving its wings. "But knowing something and being able to live it," she said, "are two very different things when you've spent a decade convincing the world and yourself that you don't need to." The car arrived 35 minutes later, earlier than expected. The driver was a quiet man named Roy, who did not ask questions and drove back toward Riley, while Joel sat in the back seat with a list of what he needed written on the back of a gas receipt. He was gone for just over an hour. He came back to find Claire exactly where he'd left her, window down, arm on the door, but the phone was fully face down on the seat beside her, and she was just sitting there looking at the field on the other side of the road, watching nothing. He didn't comment on the phone being down. He got to work. It took him 45 minutes to get the fitting replaced properly, lying half under the van on the gravel with trucks roaring past every few minutes, the heat reflecting off the asphalt into his face. Claire passed him tools through the window without being asked. After the first time, she watched him get up to get one himself. She didn't make a production of it, just started paying attention to what he reached for, had it ready when he needed it. "Socket wrench," he said from under the van. It appeared at the edge of the door. "Smaller one, 3/8. Exchange of the first for the second." "Light." She turned on her phone flashlight and angled it down where he needed it. "Little left." She moved it. He worked. She held the light. Neither of them talked for 20 minutes. When he finally got it sealed and climbed out and wiped his face with the hem of his shirt, he looked up and found her watching him with an expression he hadn't seen on her before, not the evaluation, not the controlled neutrality. Something more open. Like she'd had an hour to sit with her thoughts and come to some conclusion that had rearranged something. "You're good at that," she said. "I've had practice. I don't mean mechanically." She paused. "I mean you just do it. You don't perform it. You don't need anyone to see you doing it. You just fix the thing." He wasn't sure what to say to that, so he said, "Thanks for the light." "Thanks for not making me feel useless," she said. He looked at her. "You held the light for 45 minutes in a broken-down van on the side of a highway in the heat." "That's not..." "That," he said, "is exactly what was needed." So, she looked at him for a moment. Then she looked away, but not before he saw something in her face that was quieter than anything she'd shown him all day. Not soft Claire Sutton. He was coming to understand was not soft, and would never be soft, and that was completely fine. But quieter, like a frequency she didn't usually broadcast. He put the tools away, started the engine. It caught clean smooth from the start, no rough turnover, like the van was relieved to be healthy again. He pulled back onto the road. They drove south. The afternoon stretched long and gold in front of them. 2 hours passed that way, radio low windows down, the kind of driving that empties the head gradually, the way a slow exhale empties the lungs. Joel felt something in his shoulders drop that he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They stopped at a state campground just before 6. Not because they'd planned to, but because the sign appeared and the light was going golden, and they were still 200 miles from the coast, and the van needed to rest as much as either of them did. It was a modest place. A gravel lot, a small building with bathrooms and a camp store, a stretch of sites with fire rings and wooden picnic tables. Accessible sites were on the East Loop. Claire confirmed this herself on the website, before he'd even cut the engine. He pulled to the East Loop without discussion. They got camp chairs from the van. He'd packed one. She had what turned out to be a small folding travel chair she carried in the bag behind her wheelchair, which she produced with the matter-of-fact efficiency that characterized everything she did. They set them up at the fire ring. Joel bought firewood from a rack outside the camp store, 75 cents a bundle, and built a small fire while Claire was on the phone with Kevin, walking him through 3 decisions he apparently couldn't make without her. He could hear fragments from across the fire ring. Her voice in work mode was different, not harder exactly, but denser, more compressed, every word doing double the work of a normal word. When she hung up, she sat quietly for a moment, watching the fire take. "Crisis?" he asked. "Minor one. Resolved." She put the phone away, in the bag, not on her lap. He noted that. The fire crackled. The sky went from gold to orange to that deep bruised blue that happens just before the stars come out. Someone a few sites over was playing guitar. Nothing recognizable, just chords easy and unhurried. "Do you miss it?" Joel asked. "When you step away from it, do you miss the work itself?" She thought about it. "The decisions, yes. I like solving things. I like looking at a complicated system and finding the pressure point." She paused. "The noise around the decisions, the politics, the performance of authority, the constant need to be seen as unassailable, no. I don't miss that for 5 minutes." What would you do, he said, if the company didn't exist? She looked at him sharply. I'm not asking as a threat, he said. I'm asking because you said earlier that you used to want to change things. Before maintaining. What did that look like? She was quiet for a long time. The guitar kept going from the other site. The fire popped. I wanted to build a foundation, she said finally. Separate from the company. Focused on accessibility infrastructure, not charity investment. Actual capital going into companies building for disabled populations. Not because it's good PR. Because it's a massive underserved market and also the right thing. She paused. I wrote a 40-page proposal when I was 29, before my father stepped back. I had the framework, the initial funding plan, the partner commitments. What happened to it? Everything else happened, she said. The company needed me, and the company was real, and the foundation was still a plan, and you can't... She stopped. You can only hold so much. It's still there, though, he said. The 40 pages. She looked at him. The proposal, he said. You didn't throw it out, did you? It wasn't quite a question. He'd been paying attention all day, and he knew the answer. She looked at the fire. It's in a drawer in my home office, she said quietly. I've moved it 3 times when I changed apartments. I've never looked at it since I put it away, but I keep it. He nodded. That's not a coincidence, he said. She didn't answer. Then the sky opened up. It came with almost no warning, a wind that picked up suddenly and bent the fire sideways, and then the rain came down hard, the way summer storms do in that part of the country, without apology, all at once. They got inside the van in under a minute. Joel killed the fire with a bucket of water from the bathroom spigot, while Claire got the chairs broken down, moving faster than he expected, and then they were both inside the rain hammering the roof like something that had been waiting all day to say something, and had finally decided now was the time. Joel's shirt was soaked through. He dug in his bag and found a dry one. Claire's jacket was wet at the shoulders. Her hair, which had been perfectly controlled all day, was damp at the edges. She pressed it back with both hands in a gesture that was so human and unrehearsed that it made something in his chest move. She caught him looking. Don't, she said. I wasn't. You were doing the thing where you almost say something. He turned to look out at the rain instead. I was going to say the storm came out of nowhere. No, you weren't. He was quiet. The rain came down. The roof rang with it. The windows fogged slowly from their body heat, and the gap between the storm outside and the air inside. Joel, she said. Yeah. I haven't done anything like this in... She stopped, started again. I don't do things like this. I don't get in vans with strangers. I don't go anywhere without planning. I don't... She stopped a third time. He waited. I don't let myself not know what comes next, she said. I haven't in a very long time. Because when I don't know what comes next, I have to feel what's happening now. And what's happening now is usually... too much, he said. She looked at him. Yeah, she said. Her voice, for the first time all day, had something in it that wasn't controlled. Something that had been underneath everything else since 5 a.m. on Aldine Street underneath the flat. Certainty. The boardroom voice, the precision, the phone calls, the composure she wore like a second skeleton. Something that sounded like exhaustion. Real exhaustion, the kind that lives below. Tired below burnout, all the way down in the place where people keep the things they don't say. The rain hit the roof. The windows were fully fogged now. The world outside had gone completely invisible, and what was left was just the inside of the van. The two of them, the sound of water, and whatever it was that had been building between them all day without either of them naming it. Joel sat with that. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't try to say the right thing. Just sat there in the dark and the rain close enough that she could feel he was there and let her be whatever she needed to be without asking her to explain it. And that seemed to be exactly enough. Because Claire Sutton, who had not cried in front of another person in more years than she could count, who had sat on her office floor for 8 precisely timed minutes, and then washed her face and called Tokyo, pressed the heel of her hand against her mouth, and didn't perform anything. He didn't say anything. That was the thing she remembered afterward, that he didn't say anything. Didn't reach over. Didn't produce a tissue or a careful word or the particular brand of gentle awkwardness that people offer when they don't know how to be near someone who is breaking. He just stayed where he was close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cramped space of the van, and let the rain be loud, and let her be whatever she was, without requiring her to name it or manage it or wrap it up and make it easier for him to witness. The heel of her hand stayed pressed to her mouth for a long moment. Then she took a breath. Then another. Then she lowered her hand and looked straight ahead at the fogged windshield and said very quietly, "I'm sorry." Don't, he said. "I don't do that." "I know," he said. "I could tell. I'm not a person who falls apart." "You didn't fall apart," he said. "You just stopped holding on for 30 seconds. She was quiet. The rain kept coming down, and the sound of it filled everything, and for once, for the first time in longer than she could accurately remember, the sound of something filling everything didn't feel like an alarm. It just felt like weather. "How do you do that?" she asked. "Do what?" "Say the right thing without making it a performance." He thought about that. "Practice," he said. Ryan went through a phase at 5 where he'd cry and then immediately say sorry for crying. Broke my heart every time. I had to figure out how to tell him that feelings aren't something you apologize for. He paused. Turns out the lesson stuck in my direction too. She turned to look at him. The fog on the windows had reached the point where the outside world was completely gone. Nothing visible through any window, just white-gray, nothing. And the two of them in the middle of it, like they were the only fixed points in a disappeared map. "You're a good father," she said. "I'm a tired father," he said. "But I try." "That's what makes it good." He looked at her then. Really looked, not the sideways assessment he'd been doing all day, catching glimpses, building a picture piece by piece. Full on the way you look at someone when you've stopped pretending you're not paying attention to them. She held it. Didn't flinch, didn't redirect. Claire Sutton, who could hold a boardroom of 40 people with her eyes alone, held his gaze with something that was different from that something that wasn't about power at all. Just presence. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You've asked me about 16 things today." 17, he said. "Can I ask you what it actually feels like, the disability? Not the logistics, you've handled that all day without needing anything from me. I mean, what does it feel like to live in a world that wasn't designed for you?" She was still for a moment. He watched her decide whether to answer the real question or the safe version of it. She answered the real one. "Like you are always doing 2 jobs simultaneously," she said. "The job everyone else is doing, meeting conversation, moving through a room, getting on with life. And then the second job, which is invisible, which is calculating every space before you enter it, every surface, every threshold, every interaction where someone is going to make a decision about who you are before you've said a word." She paused. "You spend so much energy on the second job that sometimes you look up and realize you've been doing the first one on autopilot. And nobody sees the second one," he said. "Nobody sees the second one," she confirmed. "And if you ever mention it, you're either inspiring, which we've discussed, or you're a problem, someone to accommodate." She said the word like it had edges on it. I spent the first 2 years after my diagnosis in absolute fury. Not about the chair, about the accommodation. About being a task on someone's list. And then I decided I would become so undeniably competent that the accommodation would be an afterthought, she said. I would walk into every room metaphorically and be so clearly the most prepared person there that the only conversation would be about my ideas, not my chair. Did it work? She considered. Professionally, yes. Almost completely. She looked at her hands. Personally, it meant I forgot how to need anything. Because needing things felt too close to being a problem. I was quiet for a moment. "Claire," he said. "Needing things is not the same as being a problem." She looked at him. "I know that," she said. "Do you?" A pause. "Today I do," she said. "Ask me again when I'm back in the office Monday morning." "I will," he said. And there was something in his voice when he said it that made her look at him more carefully. Something that sounded less like a polite response and more like an actual intention. The rain started to ease around 9. Not stop, just pull back the way a storm will sometimes when it said most of what it had to say. Joel got out and checked on the van, came back soaked again, reported that everything looked fine. Claire had found somewhere in her bag a granola bar and 2 small bags of almonds, which she'd arranged on the console between them with the formality of someone setting a table. "It's not much," she said. "It's something," he said. "Ryan's philosophy on snacks. He's 7. He's right about most things, I'd imagine." "More than he knows," Joel said. He took the almonds. She took the granola bar. They ate in the cooling air with the rain tapping softer on the roof. "Tell me more about him," she said. Not the careful ask of someone being polite. The real kind, leaning in. So he talked about Ryan. He talked for probably 20 minutes without stopping, about the birdhouse, about the phase at 4, when Ryan had decided his name was actually Captain, and would not respond to anything else for 6 weeks, about how Ryan had his mother's eyes and Joel's stubbornness, which was a combination that was going to give some teacher a very difficult year eventually. About how Ryan had asked him last spring out of nowhere, while they were making pancakes on a Saturday morning, "Dad, do you get lonely?" And Joel had said, "No, buddy, I've got you." And Ryan had nodded, very serious, and then said, "I think you should have a friend though. Not me kind of friend. Grown-up kind." And then he'd gone back to watching his pancake bubble, like he hadn't just exposed every truth Joel had been avoiding for 4 years. Claire was smiling by the end of it. A full one, the real shape of it, uncalculated and unhurried. "A 7-year-old read you," she said. "Completely," Joel said. "Didn't even look up from the pancake. Smart kid." "Terrifying kid," he said. "The best kind." She was quiet for a moment, looking at the space between her hands. "I want to meet him," she said. She said it like she was reporting a fact she'd just discovered, not like she was making a request. He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "Is that—" She paused. "Is that a strange thing to say?" "No," he said. "No, it's not strange." She looked up. Their eyes met in the near dark of the van's interior, and something shifted, not dramatically, not with any of the ceremony that movies would give it. Just a quiet, definitive shift, like a compass settling on its direction after a long time of spinning. "Joel," she said. "Yeah. I don't know what this is." "Neither do I. I don't do things without knowing what they are." "I know," he said. I noticed that about you." She looked at him steadily. And I think," he said carefully, "that you spent a long time building a life where everything was defined before it started. And it kept you safe, and it kept you functional, and it kept you—" He paused. "It kept you alone." She didn't flinch, just held it. "And you," she said. "What kept you alone?" "Forgetting to look up from the work," he said. "Ryan was right. I stopped expecting there to be something for me, and eventually I stopped looking. Until this morning." "Until this morning," he agreed. "I woke up, and I couldn't breathe inside my own life, and I just moved. Without a plan. For the first time in 6 years." She was quiet. "And you ended up in front of me," she said. "In the middle of the road," he said. Which is not where I'm usually found at 5 in the morning," she said. "What were you actually doing out there?" he asked. "You said your car canceled, but you were already outside, in the road." She looked at the windshield. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I got up at 4, sat in my apartment. The board meeting I told you about, there's a contingent on the board that wants to take the company in a direction I think is wrong. Not unethical, just small. Profitable and small. And they've been building the case for 8 months, and I've been fighting it, and I'm—" She stopped. "I'm tired of fighting for a vision that I'm not sure I still fully believe in. The company," he said slowly, "or the direction you took it." She turned to look at him. "Those are 2 different questions," she said. "Yes," he said. "They are." The pause was long. The rain had softened to almost nothing. "The direction," she said quietly. "I still believe in the company. I believe in what it could be. What it was supposed to be when I took it." She paused. "But somewhere in the last 5 years, I've been so focused on defending it that I forgot to keep building it. The 40 pages, he said. She let out a breath. The 40 pages. How long would it take to dust them off? She looked at him. To read them or to execute them? Either. To read an afternoon. She paused. To execute 2 years minimum. Capital raising structural changes board approval. She paused again. Board approval would be the hardest. They'd see it as a distraction. Or, he said, they'd see it as the thing that makes the company worth fighting for. She was very still. He wasn't sure why he said it. He didn't know her board. He didn't know the industry. He was a construction manager from a neighborhood 40 miles behind them who had fixed a fuel line on the side of a highway today and had $43 in his wallet, or had before the car service and the parts store. But he'd been watching her talk about that proposal for the last 8 hours, without calling it that, and what he saw when she talked about it was the same thing he saw on Ryan's face when they were in the garage building. Something, that specific quality of attention that a person has when they are doing the thing they were actually made to do. You talked about the foundation the same way you talk about Ryan, she said slowly. What do you mean? When you talk about Ryan, she said, your whole register changes. You go from managing the conversation to just being in it. No performance, just genuine. She looked at him. That's how you sound when you talk about building things versus maintaining them. He looked at her. You've been paying attention, he said. I pay attention to everything, she said. It's the one thing I can always trust myself to do. He nodded. Then pay attention to this. He shifted to face her more directly in the cramped space. You lit up when you talked about that foundation. Not the company, the foundation. The original idea. The 40 pages in the drawer you've moved 3 times and never thrown out. He paused. That's not nostalgia. That's something that's still alive. She held his gaze. For a long time she didn't speak. The rain stopped. It happened cleanly one moment. It was there, and then it was gone, and the silence after, it was enormous and specific, the way silence always is after something loud. She reached over, and this was the thing he would replay later in the dark of a cheap motel room with the window cracked, replaying it with the kind of precision usually reserved for things that matter. She reached over and put her hand on his. Just placed it there. Flat. No pressure. Just present. He looked down at it, then at her. I haven't felt like a person in a very long time, she said. I've felt like a function, a title, a symbol of something. She paused. Today is the first day in years that I've just felt like a person. You are a person, he said. I know, she said. But knowing it and feeling it are different things, he finished. Yeah, I know. Her hand was still on his. He turned his hand over slowly, giving her every chance to pull back, and held hers. She didn't pull back. They sat like that for a while. The campground had gone quiet around them. The fire rings on other sites glowed dull orange in the aftermath of the rain. Somewhere an owl had started the kind of sound that belongs to the open country after dark. Joel, she said. Yeah. What happens when we go back? He didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't have one, but because the honest answer required him to be willing to say it. And saying it meant acknowledging that whatever was happening in this van was real enough to have a future that could go wrong. I don't know, he said. You run a $3 billion company. I run 3 construction crews and a 7-year-old. Those aren't incompatible, she said. No, he agreed. They're not. But I've been burned before, he said. Not by someone bad, by someone who meant it when she said she wanted the life, and then found out the life was harder than she'd expected. And I can take a hit for myself. But Ryan? He stopped. Ryan can't keep taking hits. He's 7, and he's already building his worldview, and if someone comes into it and then leaves, that's... I understand, she said, immediately, without defensiveness. I'm not saying that is you, he said. I'm saying I don't know you well enough yet to know. Yet, she said. He looked at her. Yet, he said. Something in her face, the last of whatever armor had still been standing, the final layer that the rain and the road and the broken van and the 8 minutes and all the hours in between hadn't quite reached, released. Not dramatically. Just let go. She leaned her head back against the seat, closed her eyes, breathed. I haven't told anyone about the foundation in 3 years, she said, eyes still closed. Not because it was secret, because talking about it meant admitting I'd put something down that I cared about, and I wasn't ready to admit that. And now? She opened her eyes, turned her head to look at him. Now I'm in a 1992 van in a campground I didn't plan to be in, she said, holding hands with a man I met at 5 in the morning, and apparently I'm ready to admit all kinds of things. He looked at her. The last of the cloud cover was breaking up outside, and a little bit of moonlight was finding its way through the fogged windows, thin and diffused enough to see by. Claire, he said. Yes. I'm glad you said yes this morning. She held his gaze. Something moved through her expression, complex and slow, like weather at altitude. So am I, she said. Outside the campground breathed in the aftermath of the storm. The owl called again farther off now. The fire rings had gone cold, and inside the van, 2 people who had each spent years learning how to need nothing, sat holding each other's hands in the quiet that follows rain, and neither of them let go. They slept in the van that night, not planned. Nothing about any of this had been planned, but by the time the rain fully cleared and the clock on the dash read 11:40, neither of them had suggested moving, and the suggestion had quietly expired on its own. Joel reclined his seat as far as it went, which wasn't far. Claire stayed in hers, the travel pillow she apparently always kept in her bag tucked against the window. They didn't discuss it, they just settled. He woke at 6. The campground was just starting to stir the sound of someone stoking a fire, 2 sights over a dog shaking itself out. Birds beginning the specific early morning argument they have every day, like it's the first time. He sat up slowly. His back had opinions about the seat. He ignored them. Claire was already awake. He could tell by her breathing the quality of it had changed sometime in the night from the deep regularity of sleep to the quieter, more deliberate rhythm of someone lying still and thinking. Morning, he said. Morning, she said. Neither of them moved for a moment. How's your back? She asked. Fine, he said. That's a lie. It's a manageable lie, he said. She turned her head to look at him. Her hair was down. Sometime in the night she'd taken out whatever had been holding it, and it sat loose around her face, and she looked younger than the CEO, younger than the polished certainty. She looked like a person who had slept in a van and woken up okay with it. I need coffee, she said. Camp store opens at 7. 20 minutes. 20 minutes, he confirmed. She nodded. Looked back at the ceiling of the van. He looked at it too. The morning light came in thin and clear through the windows that had finally unfogged overnight, and the inside of the van looked different in it, less like a shelter from the storm, and more like just a place ordinary and honest. I was thinking, she said. Yeah. About what you said, the foundation. She paused. I'm going to read the 40 pages when I get home. He waited. Not to execute, she said. Just to read. To see what I thought when I was 29 and had the idea and hadn't yet decided it was impractical. And if it still holds up. She was quiet for a moment. Then I'm going to have a very uncomfortable conversation with my board. Good, he said. She turned to look at him. You say that like it's simple. It's not simple, he said. But it's right. And you know the difference better than almost anyone I've ever met. She looked at him for a long moment. You've known me for 1 day. Long day, he said. She turned back to the ceiling. Yes, she said quietly. It was. He got coffee when the store opened. 2 cups the same bad quality as the gas station the morning before, which at this point had become their unspoken standard. He brought them back, and they drank in the morning air, with the van doors open, watching the campground come to life around them, and something about it felt settled in a way that the day before, for all its depth, hadn't quite been. Like overnight, something had finished forming that had been taking shape since Aldine Street. At 8, he called Ryan. He'd been working up to it since he woke up, not because he was afraid to talk to his son, but because hearing Ryan's voice had a particular way of making everything real that he wasn't sure he was ready for. Or rather, He was ready, but he wanted to be ready correctly. Ryan answered on the second ring with the energy of someone who had been awake for hours and had things to report. Dad, Mrs. Patterson made pancakes, real ones, not your kind. My pancakes are fine. They're okay, Ryan said, which was a 7-year-old being diplomatic. She put blueberries in them. And she let me watch 2 episodes of the nature show before school. And did you know, electric eels can restart someone's heart? I did not know that. It's true. Dad, where are you? Are you still on your trip? I'm heading back today, buddy. Are you okay? Ryan asked it simply the way he asked most things, direct without preamble, the way children ask things before they learn to dress questions in social clothing. Joel looked at Claire, who was giving him privacy by looking at her phone, but had the particular stillness of someone who was quietly present. Yeah, he said. I'm okay, actually okay. Good, Ryan said, satisfied. Because Mrs. Patterson said you needed some time to remember you're still a person, and I said I already knew that, but she said grown-ups need reminding sometimes. Joel laughed, genuine, full, the kind that came up from the chest. She's right, he said. She's absolutely right. Dad. Yeah. Did you find anything good out there? He looked at Claire again. This time she was looking back, watching him with that open expression, not performing anything, not managing anything, just there. Yeah, buddy, he said. I did. Good, Ryan said again. Come home soon. The sparrow had babies. The birdhouse sparrow? We have baby birds, Dad. I'll be back by tonight, Joel said. I promise. He hung up. Claire was watching him with something in her face that she didn't try to conceal. He sounds remarkable, she said. He asked if I was okay, Joel said. 7 years old, first thing he asked. He's been watching you, she said. Kids do that. They watch their parents like scientists and figure out the things that aren't being said. He nodded. Put the phone in his pocket. We should head back. Yes, she said. We should. Neither of them moved for another full minute. Then Joel finished his coffee, and Claire finished hers. And they packed what little there was to pack, loaded the van, and pulled out of the east loop of the campground onto the road that led north back toward the city they'd left before the sun was up the day before. The drive back was different from the drive out. On the way out, they had been strangers with walls up and careful space between them, learning the shape of each other by increments. On the way back, the walls were down and the space was comfortable, and they talked differently, easier, less excavation and more conversation. He told her about the project he was managing, a commercial build downtown that had been delayed by permit issues for 6 months and was finally moving. She told him about her assistant Dana, who was 24 and sharper than anyone twice her age, and whom Claire was quietly positioning to take on more responsibility, whether Dana knew it yet or not. She reminds me of myself at that age, Claire said. Before I learned to make myself smaller in rooms where people needed me to be smaller to feel comfortable. Did you ever actually do that? He asked. Make yourself smaller. She thought about it. In certain rooms, yes, early on, before I decided the effort wasn't worth what it cost. What did it cost? Myself, she said plainly. It always costs the same thing. You just don't notice the bill until it's very large. He glanced over. How large is yours? She was quiet for a moment. Large enough that I got into a stranger's van at 5 in the morning and drove to a campground and cried in a rainstorm and told him about a 40-page document I haven't looked at in years. She paused. Which suggests the payment is overdue. Or that you found someone worth paying it to, he said. She looked at him. He kept his eyes on the road, but he felt her looking, and he let her. Joel, she said. Yeah, I want to be honest with you about something. Okay. I am not easy, she said. I work constantly. I have opinions about nearly everything, and I voice them, which most people experience as exhausting. My schedule is genuinely punishing, and I'm not always willing to rearrange it. I have high standards that I apply to myself first, and then inevitably to everyone around me. She paused. And I have never once in my adult life allowed someone to get close enough to see all of that and decide to stay. He was quiet for a moment. Is that a warning? He asked. Yes, she said. Okay, he said. That's all. Okay. I fix broken engines on the side of highways in the heat, he said. I raise a 7-year-old alone. I run 3 construction crews and show up every day, regardless of whether I feel like it. He glanced over at her. I'm not looking for Easy. Easy left 4 years ago, and it turned out she wasn't actually Easy, she was just familiar. Something crossed Claire's face. That's the truest thing you've said, she told him. I have moments, he said. She turned back to the road, watched it for a while. I want to meet Ryan, she said again. Firmer this time. Not the tentative observation of the night before a statement. I know, he said. Is that, are you ready for that? He thought about Ryan on the kitchen floor at 5, asking if he was okay. About 7 years old, and already understanding that his father needed something he hadn't gotten around to finding yet. About baby sparrows in a terrible birdhouse painted by small hands. Not today, he said. But soon. If you're still. He stopped. If I still what? If this still feels real when we're back inside our actual lives, he said. Because this, he gestured at the road, the van, the air between them, all of it. This is a pocket, and pockets feel different than the rest of the coat. She understood immediately. You want to make sure it holds. I want to make sure we both hold, he said. In context, with all the regular noise turned back on. She nodded slowly. That's reasonable. It's not a no, he said. It's a let's find out. Let's find out, she repeated. Then quietly, like something she was confirming for herself. I can do that. They crossed back into the county around noon. The city started assembling itself on the Horizon Water Towers Highway, interchanges the particular compression of buildings that tells you the open space is ending. Joel felt it happening in his chest, the gradual reinstatement of weight, the things waiting, the routine, reasserting itself like gravity. But it felt different than it had yesterday morning when he'd driven away from it. Yesterday, the weight had been a trap. Now it was just his life. The real one, the one with Ryan in it, with the work and the van and the neighbor and the birdhouse. His life, which he'd been carrying so long, he'd forgotten it was also in its way everything he'd chosen. He turned onto Aldine Street at 12:47 p.m. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as it always did at this hour on a weekday, quiet, ordinary, real. He drove slowly down the block and pulled up in front of Claire's building. He cut the engine. They sat for a moment. This is you, he said. This is me, she said. She looked at the building. He looked at her, looking at it. He could see it happening, the reassembly. The CEO climbing back into place around her. The controlled expression settling. The way the building represented everything she'd been running from when she'd said yes to a stranger at 5 in the morning. Claire, he said. She turned. Don't, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Don't what? Whatever you're about to do in there, the walk back into the role, the board meeting, the whole armor of it. That's fine. You need it, and it's real, and it's yours. He held her gaze. But don't use it to talk yourself out of the 40 pages. Something moved through her face. Or this, he said. Quieter. She looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that's doing real work, processing, weighing, finding the truth inside the scale. Then she reached into her bag and found a business card, crisp, minimal, just her name and a number, and held it out to him. He took it. That's my personal cell, she said. Not the office line, not Dana's line, mine. He looked at it, looked at her. I know how to call, he said. I know you do, she said. I just need you to know I want you to. He got out. Got her chair from the back, set it up. She got herself out and settled without needing anything from him except the space to do it, which he gave her. He stood back. She turned to face him on the sidewalk in front of her building in the midday light. Standing, sitting, whatever the geometry was, she was eye level with him. He'd noticed this the first time, and he noticed it again now. She met him straight, always had. Thank you, she said. I didn't do anything, he said. You asked, she said. You asked, and then you actually showed up for the answer. That's... She stopped. That's rarer than it should be. Thank you for saying yes, he said. She held his gaze. "It was the easiest decision I made all day," she said. "And that is saying something given my job." He smiled. She almost did that movement at the corner of her mouth that he'd learned to recognize as the real version of whatever the full smile would be. Then she straightened, turned toward the building. "Joel," she said, not turning back. "Yeah. Go home. See the baby sparrows." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Don't call me ma'am," she said. And she went inside. He stood there for a moment on the sidewalk watching the door close behind her. Then he turned, got in the van and sat for a second before starting it. He thought about yesterday morning, the ceiling, the alarm he'd smashed, the bag he'd packed without knowing why, the road opening up in the dark ahead of him like an answer to a question he hadn't yet finished asking. He thought about Aldine Street and the streetlight, and a woman in the middle of the road with a phone to her ear and eyes that evaluated everything and found most of it lacking. He thought about the diner called Nothing He Could Remember, and the fuel line on the shoulder of the highway, and 45 minutes of passing tools in the heat without being asked. He thought about rain on a van roof, and a hand pressed to a mouth, and 8 minutes on an office floor, and a 40-page document in a drawer that had been moved 3 times and never thrown away. He thought about what Ryan had said. "Did you find anything good out there?" He started the engine, let it smooth out, pulled away from the curb. He drove the 4 blocks to his house. Mrs. Patterson's car was in the driveway, which meant she'd stayed through lunch, which meant she was a better person than most people would ever know. He parked, got out. Ryan came running from the backyard before he'd made it to the porch. Just appeared, exploded around the corner of the house at full speed. Shoes on the right feet for once, paint on his left hand from something unknown, face wide open. Joel caught him, lifted him straight up because he was still small enough for that, and held him, and Ryan wrapped around him with the uncomplicated totality that only children have. All the way, in nothing held back. No calculation about whether it was appropriate or whether he'd been gone long enough to earn it. "The babies are so small," Ryan said into his shoulder. "Like really small. You won't believe it." "Show me," Joel said. Ryan pulled back and looked at him with those eyes, the ones that had always seen more than Joel remembered to account for. Checked him. Found something satisfactory. "You look different," Ryan said. "Yeah. Good different," Ryan said, decisive. "Like when you fixed the van that one time and it ran right after." Joel laughed. Set him down. "Like that." "Like that?" Ryan confirmed, nodding firmly, and then turned and ran back around the corner to show him the birds. Joel followed. In the backyard, in the terrible, beautiful birdhouse they'd built together from scrap wood on a Saturday behind a small round opening painted blue by a child who had never seen a bird but understood that blue was the right color. Anyway, 4 sparrow chicks sat in a nest, pink and barely feathered, impossibly small mouths open. Ryan stood beside him, hands on the fence rail, watching them with the solemnity of someone guarding something important. "They were here when I woke up," Ryan said. "Mrs. Patterson says they come back every year if you leave the house up." "Then we leave the house up," Joel said. Ryan nodded, satisfied. And standing in the backyard of the life he'd almost driven away from, this small, ordinary life that was, in fact, everything, Joel felt something he hadn't felt in so long he'd stopped expecting it. He felt like himself, not the survival version, not the maintaining version, the original one. The one who built things instead of just fixing them, the one who laughed faster, the one who used to take up more space. The one who was still in there, had always been in there, waiting with the patience of someone who knew the person would eventually come back. His phone buzzed. He took it out. A text from an unsaved number, crisp, minimal, the way she did everything. "The 40 pages are in my hands. You were right. It still holds." He looked at it for a long moment. Then he typed back, "Good. Don't put it back in the drawer. 3 seconds. Then I won't." He put the phone in his pocket. Ryan looked up at him. "Who was that?" "A friend," Joel said. Ryan studied him with those scientist's eyes. "The good kind." Joel looked at the birdhouse. At the 4 small lives that had shown up without being planned in a structure that was imperfect and handmade and exactly right. "Yeah, buddy," he said. "The good kind." And that was true fully, completely, without reservation. The way the truest things always are. Not because everything was resolved or certain or easy, but because two people had chosen, each in their own way and in their own time, to stop pretending they didn't need anything. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as rescue. Sometimes it doesn't arrive as certainty or perfection or a plan. Sometimes it arrives as a woman in the middle of a road at 5 in the morning and a man with nowhere to go and a single word that changes everything. Yes. And the rest, all of it, is what you build from there.